Hello, welcome to AP Sources Simplified. We are continuing on with our series of review videos for the AP test. This goes along with an assignment my students do. If you're interested in the assignment, it is in the video information below. Today we are looking at a topic that has been very popular in College Board tests for the last 5 or 6 years, and that is the social and political position of women. Specifically, we are going to be looking at what is called the first wave of feminism from 1890 to 1920. We will also look a bit before and after those dates to evaluate the context and effects. All right, let's get started. First, some context. And this also serves as continuity as well, as the ideas of the traditional roles for females are never really overhauled in this era. The idea of Republican motherhood goes back to the days after the Revolution. It is the idea that women do need some education for the primary reason of educating their sons to be good and informed democratic citizens. The dominant ideas of women's roles throughout society are separate spheres and cult of domesticity, which go together. First, separate spheres is the idea that there is a sphere for men, which is politics, the tavern, working outside of the home, and higher education, and a sphere for women, which is staying at home, cooking, spinning clothes, cleaning, and taking care of the kids. Along with this is the cult of domesticity, which says that women should be pious, pure, submissive, and a good housewife. These ideas, while challenged in our era of focus, still dominate the ethos throughout. We need to set the scene a little more and discuss a few other aspects of women in society before 1890. Women had few opportunities. They were paid less than men. Management of companies was almost always male. Women had no political rights. If married, no property rights. The fight for political rights was seen as the first instrumental step for equality. A fringe movement of women fighting for suffrage sprung up in the mid-1800s, with several conventions to discuss the issue. The most famous convention being Seneca Falls, in which the attendees produced the famous document, the Declaration of Sentiments. If you'd like to know more information about that key primary source, I made a video on it that I'll put in the link in the video information below. Suffragettes also fought alongside abolitionists who believed that freedom and political rights were a universal fight. However, they were dismayed when the 15th Amendment guaranteeing the right to vote could not be denied, based on race. Did not include a provision on gender as well. Also, throughout the 1800s, women were leading the temperance movement to limit alcohol use and abuse. Okay, now let's take a look at the changes. In this era, for the first time, we see the rise of prominent female leaders who are nationally recognized. A few examples include Carrie Nation and her temperance followers, as they smashed barrels of alcohol and held temperance rallies. Several leaders of the suffrage movement became well known. Two of these were Susan B. Anthony, seen as the mother of the movement, and Alice Paul, who led the fiery new generation of suffragettes. On to some social developments. There were now more college-educated women, some with leading roles in the social gospel and progressive movements. The best example of this is Jane Addams and the Hull House movement to help immigrants Americanize. Divorce rates also rose as some women left traditional gender roles. However, it is nowhere near the spike in divorce rates from the 1970s onward. Finally, constrictive clothing gave way to more natural styles. Legally, the landmark Supreme Court case, Mueller v. Oregon, ruled a law that limited a woman's workday to 10 hours was constitutional. This was both good and bad for women. Women were being exploited in the workforce. However, a law like this may end up limiting employment opportunity. Next, World War I brought some dramatic short-term change in both progressive and regressive directions. Women entered the workforce in significant numbers during the war. However, this was short-lived, as once the war was over and men returned, along with a recession, women lost most of those jobs. The war did help boost support for women's suffrage, though. Towards the end of the era, there were two monumental victories. Throughout the time period, states were granting women the right to vote, especially states in the western half of the country. The suffrage movement would culminate with the passing of the 19th Amendment in 1920, granting women the right to vote across the whole country. Also, the 18th Amendment had passed in 1919. While not specifically a women's rights focus, however, the movement had been led by women for decades. I want to wrap this up with a short reflection on the information and ask the question, did this era produce great social and political change for women? Some say yes, and point to the political victories and to a few females gaining prominence in athletics, cinema, political figures, and changes in women's fashion, especially in the 1920s. My opinion is no, there was not a lot of change. And it's not because of a lack of effort. That was most definitely there. However, the cult of domesticity and separate spheres were strong social forces, and those ideals never really went away. Maybe their influence decreased slightly, but still they dominated. The women who did gain prominence in any sphere were few and far between. Also, the emerging consumer culture and media reinforced the cult of domesticity. And finally, there were no equal pay acts, legalized birth control, civil rights, or anti-discrimination acts. It would be decades until any of that was achieved. And while we still have a ways to go in our present era, I know I'm cherry picking a stat here, but I think it still says a lot. Last year saw an all-time record of females as head of Fortune 500 companies. That is the largest 500 companies in the United States. That total was 33. Okay, that does it for the social and political position of women from 1890 to 1920. I hope this video could help you with your studies. Subscribe to the channel for more APUSH review and primary source explanation videos.